how to use the routes. So let's look at what is route as such. Okay. A route is nothing but it's a URL pattern that is mapped to a particular handler. So you just provide a pattern to the handler saying that this is how you're supposed to map the URL to the particular location. Now the handler can map the URL to a physical file which resides on the web server's hard disk, or it can map to a particular class. Usually those classes are the controllers. So it can map the request to a controller, or it can map it to a physical file, depending upon what type of pattern that is specified in the in the mapping. The mapping is specified by creating an instance of a route class, and if you look at your project here in the web config, you will notice that there is under the web, you will notice that there is a reference to the system.web.routing. So there is a reference to that. So if you are thinking that from where do we get the classes? In the configuration, they have specified all the details as to how to handle the routes. Now these routes are nothing but they are instances of a class called as the route class, and they are added as a property to the routing table. So the routing table, if you again look at the global, you will notice that this particular thing that you are trying to add this route is a collection, and this collection is added to a routing table. So when your MBC application starts, it uses it loads a routing table, and whenever you add extra routing information here, if you type your own routing information, that route will be added to the table. So the table will contain all the possible routes that are applicable for a given application. And whenever a URL or whenever a pattern is given to the table, it matches the individual row to figure out which among the available route matches the given pattern. Whichever that matches first will win the race, and that particular map or that particular route is taken, and then the appropriate actions are being performed. Now, how do we specify the mapping? So the mapping, or also called as the URL pattern, is specified by either putting the literal values, that is the literal characters, as well as by supplying the variable parameters, usually called as URL parameters. Okay. Now every placeholder must be separated by a slash, and if you are using the variable placeholder like the action or the controller or this kind of thing, they have to be placed inside the flower bracket. So here the language specifies it's a variable, it's not the literal value, it is a placeholder for something that can be changed. So it just means to say that it's a placeholder. Again, if you can put two placeholder between the slash symbol, however, if you are placing two placeholder one after the other, they must be separated by one more literal. So if you look at the option here, we have language one variable, and we have the country one more variable. There is no literal separator here. In that case, this particular route is not valid. So if you want to get a valid route, and if you want to put two variables or two parameters in between one of the slash, it can be here or it can be any other places, you will have to separate them by some or other type of literals. Let's look at the simple example that is provided by default to you by the Visual Studio. So when you use this particular route, you will notice that the first part is specifying that you are supposed to ignore the route, and the star indicates that it is any, it means any pattern that is matching it. So whatever that comes after this or within the pattern is all is not considered. Okay. Now let's look at the first part. You are already familiar. First part is the name of the route that you are using. The name is used in later stage. If you want to refer it back, you can use a name. Name could be anything. It's the one that you are going to use to refer the route in the later stage. The pattern is the one that I specified. So in this case, all the values which are specified in the patterns are the variables. So they are not the actual placeholder. So control is a variable, or it's a placeholder. It's not the actual URL that is being typed over there. So it can be anything. So in other words, it is like you are specifying this is a variable X, this is a variable Y, and it may be a variable Z. So you are just specifying the variable. Anything can come over here, anything can come over here, and anything can come over here. How do you specify it as a variable? If you want to specify it as a variable, it must start with the flower bracket and end with the flower bracket. So whatever you type within the flower bracket is considered to be a variable. However, if you blindly type something like this, suppose if you type product and category, something of this type. Now I'm not putting it inside a flower bracket. It means this is a physical direct address. It is not a variable. When a URL is requested, and it must be HTTP, maybe localhost or anything, / product. It's the actual value that you are specifying. So this is going to match for only the thing that is typed as a product. And after this, if I type the category, it's going to match. Whereas this one can match to the product, it can match to a student, it can match to anything, because it's just a variable. So you are saying that the pattern will be of this type. So you are going to get one something, some XYZ, followed by some XYZ, and followed by some XYZ. So anything can be there. So it is 3 values, each separated by a slash. That's the only thing is said here. So there are 3 values are there, each separated by a slash. Okay. So if that you get any 3 values separated by slash, this pattern has to be, or this route has to be used. And whatever that values are being specified, you are supposed to follow it. For example, if the pattern comes here as say, assume that this localhost everything is there. So let me assume that you have the pattern like HTTP, some company, or let's say localhost / category / product / say 5. In that case, what is going to happen? So this category is going to be mapped to this one. The product will be mapped to this one. The value that you are typing will be mapped to this one. Then what will happen? After this, what is going to happen? For this, it's going to search for a controller with the name category. So it's going to search for a controller with that name, and inside that it expects that there must be a method with the name product, and then there must be a parameter, or it's going to inject a parameter ID one sets a value 5 and put that thing into the method. So this is how it's going to work. So remember, when the pattern matches, if this pattern matches, if there is any match for this, for example, the match could be this one. So you may get HTTP, localhost, or anything for that matter, some company name. say student, say MCA, say 5, it just means to say that there is a controller with the name student, there is a method inside it called as MCA, and it's going to take up a parameter value 5 that is given to it. So it just means if the pattern matches, it's going to use this as a literal value for figuring out which class or which method is going to make use of it. Okay. Now, if the pattern is not matching, suppose if the partial pattern is matching, then what you are supposed to do? So, for example, if you have this kind of thing, HTTP student / MCA, suppose say, or any capital MCA, but the last one is not specified. So, will this match the pattern? The answer is yes, it's going to match the pattern. So, it's going to match here, it's going to match here, and there is no ID that is provided. But you notice there, for the ID, it is marked as ID is optional. So, even if the ID is not specified, just match that particular thing. So, it's just optional. What will happen if this pattern is given? So, what if you are getting like this? HTTP localhost / student. Will it match the pattern? The answer is yes, it's going to match the pattern. Why? The reason is it just says anything. Okay. And this is not specified, but you are giving a default action. So you say that if the action is not specified, assume that the student class will have a method called as index. There is going to be a method called as index within the student class, and it is assumed. So this is the default value. What about the parameter? Parameter, you have already said it is optional. So if it's a partial match, but still it's going to use the same route. What will happen if somebody types this, that is HTTP localhost? Will this match the pattern? The answer is yes. Again, it's going to match. What is the reason? Here it comes here and it says there must be a variable, but it says that if the variable is not provided, if the control is not provided, assume the control to be home. So it just assumes that there is going to be a controller called as home, and inside that home, assume that there is going to be a method called as index, and then try to pass this parameter, which is again optional, to it. It's not there, so it's optional. Whether you pass it or not, it's not going to take it. So this is why I told you that it's a greedy map. It almost matches anything, right from the local host to the last value. It's going to match. Again, if there is a match for the particular route, if it matches this route, after this you may have 100 others route that's provided over here. All of them will be ignored. The first match, if it gets the first match, it stops the search and then uses that particular route. Now, a simple example over here. So this is how you are going to write in real life. So for example, example.com, user is a controller, edit is an action, ID is something. Now the next question is, do I have to type like this every time? The controller name, the method name, and the ID name. The answer is no. You are free to type anything, or you are free to generate your own patterns. This pattern that is given to you is the default pattern. So if you don't like this pattern, if you say that I have my own pattern and my pattern does not take 3 parameters, I want to generate something of this thing, HTTP, say my company /products/ID. So can I generate this? The answer is yes. You can change it. You have to write the pattern here. how do you write? I'm going to just write the pattern here. So it must be a product. I'm just writing the pattern here. I'm going to write only this part. So isn't that you are creating entire route there? So you're supposed to write, it must start with the product, and you can have any ID. So this means to say that it has to have a product. So this is a fixed value, and the ID can be anything. So it can be 5, it can be 6, it can be 10, anything. So now what happens is whenever a request comes with a starting value as product, it will be matched for this one. If there is a match, it's going to just use that value. So what does that mean? Provide all the restrictive pattern at the beginning and the liberal ones at the end, so that the restrictive ones are first checked, and then if there is no match, the liberal ones will be checked. Let's look at how this particular pattern is going to go. So we have a pattern, and the pattern says that localhost product by ID 3. How does it go? So when you say the product will be mapped to the controller, ID will be mapped to the action. The by ID will be mapped to the action, and the 3 will be mapped to the ID. So it's a perfect match. And what you get here is the controller is the product, action is the ID, by ID, and the ID is, this is the one. Okay. So let's look at the other one, and let's look at how this is going to map. So let's look at here. Now what is not available there is the ID. So will it match? The answer is yes. The product is the controller, ID by ID is the action, but you notice that no parameters are provided. The ID is provided, but it's all right because it is said here that I don't get my mouse point. Okay. It's said here that the ID is optional, so it's going to go fine. Let's go to the next option, and that is this one. So you have the local host and just the product. Will it map to this particular pattern? The answer is yes. Oops. The answer is yes, because the product is going to match to the controller. There is no action. In that case, it's going to assume that the action is the index. There is no ID, it's all right, because we said the ID is optional. So it's going to go fine. Let's look at this option over here. So we have just the local host, and will it match this pattern? The answer is yes. There is no controller, so we take the default as home. There is no action, so we take the default as index. The ID is not there, it's all right for us. So because the ID itself is an optional one. So let's look at this particular pattern. So the pattern has been changed now. So we have users/username. Now you must understand here that when you write users without the flower bracket, that means there must be a literal match for this. So the pattern must have users, the word users inside it, otherwise it's not going to map to this particular thing. Now if you notice the pattern over here, if you notice the pattern over here, you have the users in the pattern, and the next one is a username. By default, it says that the users is a controller, action is, remember this is the default value. What's the meaning of saying default value? Provide a value. If the values are not provided, then you try to use it. Now in this case, both the values are provided, so these defaults will not be used up. So users will be mapped there, and the username will be mapped to this one. Let's go to this one. Let's see whether there is going to be a map. Now here it says there is user, it's going to map, but there is no username. However, it's all right for us because it is said that the username is a default value. So you notice over here, it just says that a username is a default value. You must understand over here that we are not trying to map the, now the question is, let me go over here, what is the action name? So when for this particular map, what is the action that will be performed? What is the action that is going to be performed? There is a controller called users. There is a controller called users. You can see that. Then it must be. There is a controller called users. Inside this, which method is mapped? So there are many methods are there. Which method within that? This is a user, is you know very well. It's a class after all. There is a class called as users. Which method among this will be mapped? So what's the answer? Which method is getting mapped? When you look at this one, so you have users username, which is getting mapped. So which is the name of the method that will be invoked? The controller is user. So this is the class. Which is the name of the method that will be used? Value of action by default is the username. So you notice over here that you are not, if you look at this particular place over here, you notice that this is a keyword. It's like a keyword. This word is not being used here. So that means to say that by default, regardless of the pattern, it's going to go and hit the users. So that is the thing. The next one, it says that the action within it is not specified here. You are saying that I am not specifying the action, but you are supposed to take this action for granted. So that is what is being told there. So the action is the username. So you are specifying here that the action is username regardless of this. But you are saying that I am supplying some extra information, and that is the username. So this is not an action. This can be a parameter that I'm trying to pass to the username. Okay. So if I don't supply the parameter, then take the name as a default value. This is what you are specifying there. So let's go and let's look at this one now. So what will happen in this case? So we have the user, then there is no action. But you notice over here, even though that arrow is a bit short, the action is by username. Okay, so it's going to map. What will happen for this one? Look at this pattern and look at and tell me what is going to happen in this case. Yes, what's going to happen in this case? Yes. What's the difference between this and the previous case? Previous case, you have a default value called as username. It has a default value called as default value. So there is a default value, it is specified. So what does that mean? If the username is not specified, assume that this is it. Now let's go to the other side. Now what happens? Let's come back to it. Now what happens? No default value is supplied. So look at the pattern there. It says the users. So user will be mapped to the users. Action is not specified. So action is the username. But then you said there must be an ID. But there is no default for the ID. So it just breaks down and says that it's not found. I cannot match this one. If you have only this route, only one route is there, it's going to say that I can't match this. Because I can't get the location where this particular class exists or particular thing exists. Let's look at the other patterns which are there. So we have controller, action, and ID. So if you specify like this controller, action, and ID, so one of the match, you can have many other match. So this is the from the good old north wind. So you have the product, and you can have the action as show, and you can take the categories as beverages. So one particular pattern. The other one is, you notice over here, it just says that anything can come here, and it is mapped to the details.aspx. So look at the difference here. This is a map directly to a file name. So you are just saying that there is a file called as detail.aspx. It could be anything. For example, it could be products details.aspx. It could be employees slash details.aspx or anything. So any map that can happen. So the next one is block action entry. So block some action could be shown and the number. The next one, report type. You notice that there are 4 slashes are there. You can extend to any degree that you can go. It's not just 3. It's not just 2. You can have any one. So report type, year, month, day. So report type is sales, year, month, day. Again, locale and the action, US show, or the language. You notice over here between the slash there are 2 literals, and it must be separated by 1 more literal. If you don't do that thing, you're going to get an error message. So this is English US. So this is going to map here. This is going to map here, and the action you're going to get that. Now there are sometimes when you need to have a constraint. So what could be a constraint? Let's take an example, very simple example. I'm not going to. I think we will not be able to get time to type the things. So let me take a simple example over here, and I'm going to take yellow as my color. Let me go over here, and let me write a method. So let me assume that there is a class. Slightly increase the phone. So there is a class, let's say, called as my controller, and it implements controller. Okay, so this is not really required. You have a class, and within this class, let me assume that there is a method. So it's a public method. I assume that that's the action. So let's say my method, and it takes int id, and it's going to do some calculation on this. So assume that it knows that okay, this is an integer, and it will do some integer calculation over here inside it. Now let me assume that this is the pattern that you are given: HTTP my controller slash my method. Now assume that there is going to be a map, and 5. Now 5 is an integer. Assume that the exact match is going to happen. So it's going to go to the controller here. It's going to go to the my method here, and it's going to supply this ID to the ID over here. So this is going to map. But what will happen if somebody tries to type this thing? So somebody is going to type like this: my controller, my method, and they're going to type this. So you notice that this is not a integer. However, for the route, this is a valid route. The reason is it says my controller and the my controller. Let's say the map is this is the one. You have the URL as controller and slash action slash ID. So this is the one that you have, and this is the map that you are using. So it says okay, controller is there, method is there, ID is there. So why can't I call this one? Now it's going to call this, and it's going to supply this string into the integer over here, and immediately your method fails, and you get a error message on the on your screen saying that that's not possible because I don't expect you to type a name for the ID. I expect the ID to be a number. So that means to say that for this pattern, you have to constrain what is going to come here. Or you can say this can be only string, or it can be only numerical value. Or for example, if you suppose if you try to get a pattern like this, if you have a pattern of this type, say year slash month slash date. Now, when you have this kind of thing, this is going to be a date, but it must be a valid year. So, year can be four digits, month can be 2 digits, or day can be 2 digits. You have to constrain it. Otherwise, people will type anything and everything that they please. So, how do we constrain it? The way in which we do it is we put a constraint after that. So we put a constraint. Now I have not explained, but I forgot that particular thing. Now suppose if you create one more thing. Suppose if you try to create a student for that matter. So if you say okay. Now suppose if you create a class called as student. And suppose if you have a property, so I'm going to just say prop, you know very well, property int id, just to avoid typing everything. This you know very well, property is nothing but string name, okay. And let's assume that. And when you instantiate, you are going to write like this: student std is equal to new. This is what you usually used to do. And here you used to write like id equal to 5 and name equal to something. Okay, and then used to. This is a valid one. There is the other way in which you can do it. The other way in which you can do it is you can say student. I don't know whether I told you this or not. Equal to new student, and then you can say that name. I'm supplying you the name. Okay, colon here, and then supply the value. So here you are saying that this not for the this one. You can supply the value here. So let me give you one other example. Let's say we have a public method. I'm writing it. Isn't that I'm writing it inside this one? So I'm extending it here. So let me assume that you have a public method. Public say add name, and you have string first name and string last name and so on. So you have this method here. Okay. If you want to call this method, say std, and if you call this add name, you can say that I am first supplying you the last name, put a colon, and then supply the name, then put a comma, then you say first name, and then supply something. Now what is the difference between these two things? You are saying, you will notice that you are supposed to write the first name first and the last name next, but you said that I am supplying you the last name first. So you are, in other words, you are saying that this is a value for the last name and this is a value for the first name. I am sending it in the different order than what is specified in the function name, but it's all right, just map it. So when you put this colon followed by something, it just means to say that you are saying to the compiler that this is match this literal in the input parameters or in the argument, and then use it there. So that is what is being specified here. If you notice over here, you notice where is the mouse pointer? You notice that they have put the name here, name colon, indicating that I am supplying you. So this log is the value that is supplied to the name. So you're just telling the compiler that this value has to go to this name part. The next one has to go to the URL part. The next one has to go to the default part. What's the advantage of this kind of putting a tag to the values is you may not find it so useful if you have 4 values, because you know very well the first one is the name, second one is the URL, third one is the default, and the fourth one is the constraint. Assume that you have a method that takes 16 or 17 parameters. So is this kind of methods are there? The answer is yes. If you have written COM applications, whenever you activate any COM object, most of the time you start sending minimum of 16 parameters, and you must know which is the parameter that you are supplying. And if you develop a COM application, this is one of the dirtiest thing that you will ever encounter, because most of the values are optionals, so you don't have to specify all of them, but you must put the values, the comma separation, and wherever you want to add a new value, you have to just put it there. So it is very difficult to figure out among those 16 which is the name, which is the ID, which is the parameter, and so on and so forth. So it was introduced first in the COM related application, wherein the Microsoft told the developer that if you don't remember what value has to be specified, just you know that I am supposed to specify the source. So write that source, put a colon, and supply the value. That's the only thing. You don't have to remember all the 16 argument values. So this was introduced then, and now it is made as a de facto. So anywhere you can use it. So I think if I have my Visual Studio open, I can just give you a simple example here. Let me put it inside a I'm going to just create a student. So inside the student, I'm not going to take any parameter or anything. I'm going to say public my method, and I'm going to say int x, float y, string name, say double t, say what do you have. So many are there. Now what if I try to activate this method? I'm going to say it's void. It's not going to return anything. So many options are there. Which one am I supposed to use? This is going to be a terrible thing. Suppose if you try to get it here, if you go over here, somewhere I'm going to just activate that student. So I'm going to just say student yesterday equal to new student. We'll have to get a, I want to import it. Now if I try to activate that method, so if you see here, when I try to say my method, you will notice that it's going to say that this is what you are supposed to supply. Okay. The thing is, among them, some of them could be optional. So I can go over here and then say that this is optional. So I've specified here that this is optional. If you are specifying the optional parameter, it must be there at the end. So I don't want to break up that. So if you specify the optional parameter, it must be at the end, not in the middle. This one I think I remember to have told you. Let's go over here, and now if I want to supply it, I know that I'm supposed to supply a name. So I'm going to say name, and you notice that it is trying to highlight that now you're trying to give something for the name. Okay, then the okay, so you said that I'm trying to supply. I'm going to say I'm trying to supply X. So you notice that I don't know whether you'll be able to see that thing. It is highlighting which value you're trying to supply. Now, if I say I'm trying to supply B, you will notice that the minute I supply it, it's highlighting this, saying that you are trying to supply it over here. Now, if I had all of them are remaining as optional, I can just supply it in this order. You notice that this is not the order in which the method has been declared. The order is different. So this is the order. You're supposed to type it, and without this, without specifying the tag name in front of it, if you give it to the compiler will complain and say that I expect you to type the first parameter as a integer, and I don't expect you to start with a string here. But if I complete it, let me, if I go for the completion and put all the remaining one, the compiler will be happy to take this value for the name and supply it for the appropriate placeholder within the method. So this is what is happening there. So whenever you see somebody writing that, they are just writing you, this thing to just help you out, to tell you that I am supplying the value for the parameter with the name, parameter with the name URL, parameter with the name default, and the parameter with the name constraint. If you know all of them, there is no need to put the colon and waste time in typing that. But if you write this one, the program itself becomes self-explanatory. So it's like you are writing a remark statement specifying what it is going to take. So whoever is going to read this thing, they know very well, okay, blog must be the name, the other part must be a URL, the other one is the default, and let's come back to the place where I stopped it, and that is the last part is the constraint. Whether you write it or not, the last parameter, the fourth